who has stated, the hardest thing in answering your question, Maya, would be, how do you convince people that resources are out there and that we often see people who need the resources the most are the least likely to use them? YouthWorks used to be able to come and pick you up for work or for school anywhere from Espanola to Albuquerque, but we're not sure if they still do. And there's the belief that gas was paid for by one single fantastic person. Shout out to Malin, because Malin is awesome. Warehouse 21 was great, but it was impossible to get creative space outside of its existing programs while it was around. But artistic outlets that allow people to be seen are also practically none. And then I'd also like to mention Outreach, YouthWorks. Those were all great resources for youth.
Yeah, do any of you members have any kind of advice or things you'd like to tell the providers? Because I think they've asked a lot of really fantastic questions, and obviously we'll address this when we do our training. Once that's so much farther down the road, there's going to be so much that has to go into that. But I'd love to hear you guys, answer some of these questions that they're asking, or just give them some feedback.
Could we state a specific question that providers have for the YAB that the YAB members could answer? A specific one? One at a time.
Yeah, this is Tracy. I know Hillary talked about what are those, what's the silos, and what are the shoot, I'm trying to think now, have a brain freeze. What are some of the reasons why youth would be hesitant or less likely to utilize a service? What is something that would stop you from really trusting a service or believing that a service could help what you're needing at that time? I guess that's really, I'm trying to phrase it in a way that
towards barrier. What would be the barriers?
Yeah, thank you. There we go. Yes, the barriers. What's a big barrier that you guys have experienced?
Okay, I'll answer that. So transportation is a huge issue. But beyond that, a lot of it has to do with faith in the system. People will say, oh, well, YouthWorks. I mean, I've been in conversations where people will say, oh, YouthWorks, they pay you to get your GED. And that's great, but I'll probably make more money selling weed or selling Xanax or whatever. And so I think that there's a very large, misconception of what will work, and as far as education, in our public school system, you learn nothing about law. You learn nothing about real life consequences, and so that forethought, especially as technology becomes more advanced and media becomes more influential and more prominent, that question is almost never asked. It's like people can be aware that the programs are out there, but not see the benefit in it. I think that we need a more singular direction, because like with anything, it is a product, and you're trying to sell people something, which is, hey, if you do this might work. And I think we just need to find a way to be more convincing that we can help people. Because they're like, well, people have helped me before, and I've had help from these programs before. And in some cases, they've even made it worse for some people, or they would see it that way.
Thanks. I appreciate that point of view. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. And I want to just say, I think something that would really help, like, kind of break through the barrier is just like mentorship, and having somebody like take the steps with you is like so crucial, because it like,
Definitely.
I don't know, it like boosts your confidence, and it like, just mentorship, however you want to take that. It's like just somebody like there taking the steps with you. A lot of people like say that they have ADHD, it's hard to focus. So someone to help keep you focused on the task at hand and like following through, because it's easy to start something, or starting something's hard too, but following through and actually like completing the thing, takes a lot of energy. So, if there's someone just like keep you focused on the task and the goal, and like mentorship to walk you and take the steps with you, and that's really helped me, at least. And I don't know if there's any sort of program like that, but mentorship.
Shout out to Star.
If I could follow up with you, Nikolai, it really caught my ear when you said services should not make a situation worse. Can you give me, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but can you give me an example of something like that? I'm just kind of curious as to, because nobody I know wants to do that.
Sure.
So if that's happening inadvertently, I'd be really interested in hearing more about that.
Sure. And the institutions themselves, I don't think are inherently to blame, but nonetheless, it's a problem that we have a responsibility to address. For quite some time, YouthWorks would not only be a place where, people would come to deal with their problems, but it was also a place where people would bring their problems, and sometimes that would influence others in a way that was, not helpful. YouthWorks was a great place to go to purchase illicit drugs for a lot of young people. And I really don't want to throw YouthWorks under the bus. I'm almost regretting saying that already. But it's like Alistair was saying. I think we need a closer form of mentorship, because so many of these the people in concern are in some way lacking of that form of mentorship, which is oftentimes put them in whatever situation that they may be in. And so almost beyond a lot of the other forms of help that we are offering, which are great, that would almost seem like a priority. The mentorship part, as Alistair was saying.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
one thing I
because-
want, sorry, go ahead.
There's like,
Because
there's
you-
a lot of people not doing anything, and if those people all the people are gonna have common interests and get together and not do anything, and it's like,
Right. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So your point is not to lead the horse to water, because the water is already there. The point is to make the horse understand that it needs to drink water.
anyway, guys, thank you so much. I gotta go. I'm at work. So anyway, big love, toodles, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, Alistair. And one thing I want to kind of mention, because it kind of goes hand in hand with this, is like with a lot of these housing programs, I've seen it with a lot of my friends where like they get into the program and then, like I said, like he said, the mentorship thing isn't there. They're now in this house. and they have no idea what to do with it, they're there. And unfortunately, sometimes they then get kind of targeted as like, oh, so and so has a house, I could go stay with them now. And then now suddenly you have a trap house and you have a mini shelter going on in this person's apartment. And I think sometimes there's not as much of that mentorship or leadership in like supervising that, I guess, or like educating them on like, okay, so now you have this house. So here's what you should do with your free time, looking for jobs or encouraging hobbies, making those healthy boundaries too. I think teaching youth boundaries is so important. And I don't think a lot of us really do that, you know, like a lot of these kids, they just want to help out their friends, but then they get drawn into this, you know, oh, I'm helping so and so out, but then they have this girlfriend and then they have this friend. And now, like I said, it's a bad situation because they don't know how to set their boundaries and they don't know what they should be doing with their free time. So I think that's one thing that's kind of one of those examples of a situation becoming worse when we're trying to make it better.
I'm gonna,
Yeah, and I
I'm
want to
gonna-
speak to that as a provider a little bit about, you know, goes back to my original like question to the group. So now we have the service coordinator trying to contact that person who has this situation going on, and we want to offer those life skills, but those calls aren't being returned or that person's avoiding. And I want to change that culture where you don't see I would love to see where the service coordinator is seen as that mentor that could help with the life skills and setting healthy boundaries with people and helping them get directed towards a lot of these resources that are already there. We know they're there. But really, sometimes the biggest barrier is fear. Oh, I don't want anyone to know because we're doing stuff. We know you're doing stuff. It's okay. We want to help you be safe. And we want to help you retain your housing so you don't end up homeless again. So it's not about judgment for anybody. It's about solution finding. And so I really do want to hear about the group. It's like, what makes me return that call? Or what makes me fear returning that call for the provider who's really comes to work every day saying, man, I really want to solve this problem.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that the provider should be more of like a sponsor to that youth or that young adult, where when they're at their lowest point, they feel safe being able to call that person and say, hey, I'm at my lowest point and I need help. And I think if we approach it in that fashion, it's not going to be feared because it's really that person that's just going to be there, like Alistar said, walking alongside you and helping you, even in those really low moments. And so I think that if we can present it in that way, there could be that trust could be broken, and they will, you know, the clients will, the young adults will trust that person. So I think that's just my observation.
Yeah, and this is Hillary, and I think the idea of mentorship and is really nuanced and careful that I'm almost afraid to talk about it. Because I it's a really interesting conversation, and the idea of mentor, like I almost kind of identify it as that person. It's very much finding that balance between autonomy and respect. And I think that the pendulum does swing back and forth, because the interesting thing is that idea that kind of came up in the conversation is, you know, there is a level of guidance, you know, this idea of moving towards autonomy and voice, but also understanding from the young adults that, you know, having a certain element that provides education and guidance is important. And one of the things that I think would be really great to implement is a, you know, and maybe working on a term, a mentorship program that includes the voice of young adults in its building. Because I think it's almost like that having a cultural liaison, someone that can speak to ways in which to support young adults in a ways that preserves, that keeps their autonomy. And also wondering if, you know, when we think of that person and that person's ability to follow the young adult Is it the responsibility of one shelter? Ensuring that that person can move with that young adult, regardless of where they happen to be staying that night. And that I'm very aware is it puts the responsibility perhaps more on something like CYFD, but that idea that, you have young adults that are having these consistently disrupted living situations, and to be dependent on where they're staying for their mentorship is a big responsibility for that space. And it also might not, I think about this a lot. I'm so sorry to talk about it, but it's that idea of having a consistent person, and where can that best be found when a young adult is moving to a lot of different places and being allowed to move in a lot of different places. And those are just a lot of questions I have when it comes to supporting young adults. I'm sorry, everything this meeting is asking has just hit so many perfect questions here that I keep throwing out more questions because this is just so excellent and interesting. So I just want to thank you all for that.
Can I also share a few thoughts? To me, these are all like very huge range question and topics, because there is not like a single solution how we can support youth. I'm 37 years old, and I cannot consider myself anymore a young person or youth, but I sometimes feel as lost as a 15 years old or a 20 years old or a 25 years old. And sometimes just because I have a little bit more of a experience in life, that I was able to reach some milestones in my life, does not mean that I have an understanding of how to navigate life and resolve challenges, especially when I believe that we live in a society that is in such pain that we look and pinpoint different symptoms, but we don't know what is the real cause and what is the real root of the disease. And sometimes we try to understand it our own ways, and we can only see some facet of the reality or the truth, and we believe it's maybe what is it that needs to be changed. But I believe that as a youth, when I look in my own experience, people would tell me to do stuff, and I had to do it myself, and I had to do my mistake until I went through the experience, burned myself, and realized, okay, I should have listened to what they were saying. But that's just me. Some other youth maybe are different, and they will like, you know what, I'm gonna listen this time. So I think sometimes, young people should just find those places where they can engage in conversation with their peers, and just try to go on deeper, conversation. I would give an example. Youth works. Nikolai, if it's okay, I'm just going to use the example that you mentioned about youth work. Youth work provides a service like a restaurant. You go there, they give you food. Now you can go, you order your food, and you might get food poisoning. So you can blame the restaurant, or you can also realize, well, the restaurant put on the menu that consuming raw foods might get the risk of getting food poisoning, for example. And so, to me, the same could be applied to youth work. They provide a service where youth engage and youth meet together with a purpose. But now, if someone is going to utilize that place to do some other things, then it's not the simple, it's almost like a natural consequence. Okay, you're trying to resolve an issue, is to help and support youth to go in a direction, but maybe someone is going to be like, I'm going to be smart, and I'm here see just like a marketplace where I can just engage and do my business activity, which is also fine. And I think every youth should be guided to look with their own eyes and understand what is it, the reality, what is the truth, like not always go deeper on what is it that we are trying to resolve in ourselves, and how to move forward. Because sometimes mentor, like I remember saying to you, and sometimes I get desperate, that I get even in a sense very aggressive. I look them in the eyes and I'm like, hey, remember this day that you're getting house, how happy you are, and how excited you are that you're getting house. And remember the day that if I have to come to you, I'll be there, because if you get evicted because you get too many people in your house, or you get to do drugs, like at the end, you try to tell them in one way, you try to tell them in another way. Whatever way I try to tell them, even if I bring them donuts and like, hey, please don't have friends with you doing drug here because you're going to get evicted. Still, it's not up to me on the result of the youth. So sometimes they have to go through this experience and get evicted. And I think, as David was saying, it's not about them doing the getting evicted, which seems like a negative things, but actually is them going through this experience and having someone with no judgment to help them to reflect on the experience and say, like you did something great in being generous and hosting people, but when you start to host people, you get yourself in a situation where if they start to take over, or they start to use drugs, like it becomes more difficult to say, no, sorry, you're not allowed to do that, go out. And so it might be easier that you start to follow them. I mean, I started to smoke when I was 12 or 13 years old. The only reason why I started to smoke, honestly, because every of my friends around me was smoking. Until 18 years old, I was looking, why am I smoking? I was still smoking because everyone around me was smoking. At 23 years old, I was able to start to realize, well, actually, it's not really that I want to smoke, but everyone was doing it. So this is why I started. And then is when I started to realize, oh, I had to go to this internal own reflection to realize, oh, maybe it's not really what I want to do. Now I can take a different step. But it took me from 12 to 22 years, like 10 years, to realize that I don't want to smoke, but I was just doing it because everyone was doing it. And so I think that a lot of time I believe like mentors and everything is very important, but it does not work for everyone. And we just have to be like open that everyone is going through an experience and in a journey, and each of us can somehow impact a little bit of the journey and move them forward.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to what Buddy was saying, as far as the mentorship, and I think bringing youth voice and experience into these systems, and kind of transforming them from the inside out is super important. And I think having, even if it's a participant, a successful participant that has gone through the system, that can kind of walk side by side with people that are just entering the system, so that they can kind of guide these youth through the process. I think it's super valuable because it gives a sense of what things can look like when somebody is successful in a program, and what things can turn into, because I think there is a major distrust in systems. There's a distrust in a lot of like these funding sources that are coming from the government. And I think seeing that real case scenarios play out really does shine. And I think that's one of the reasons why I even thought of inviting the YAB to kind of lead this meeting. Is I think a lot of times we get stuck in the rut of the system and saying, this is how it's done. This is how it's always going to be done. And it kind of just continues that cycle and that flow. And I think
breaking it up and bringing new ideas from actual experience is how things change. And so with those youth, if they're actual participants as mentors, I think that might be a valuable resource to kind of assist those new participants.
Thank you, Forrest. You kind of keyed some things I really want to speak to. I really appreciate Bobby speaking up, and I really appreciate, this is probably my favorite core meeting I've ever been to, quite honestly, because this is the first time I'm really getting positive and very important feedback on how we can improve. And I want to get away from the word system. We are not a system. We're a community of human beings who showed up and want to do better. And we want to be positive, and we want to help solve a problem. And the problem is somewhere, somebody, somehow, all of us even, we have homelessness, and that's what we're trying to solve. And then because of homelessness, basic things that youth have to navigate in life aren't being supported. And that's the truth. The truth is most youth, like myself and like Body's saying, we go through these stages of change and growth as a human being, and we do need that positive peer support and adult support in our life. And that's the idea, that there's these positive folks out here trying to do this good work to help get you housed, so then you can start navigating those issues in life that we all have to make those choices. But at the same time, I believe in natural consequences, because those are the facts of life. And if I go and deal drugs, everyone, I hope I get caught and get arrested and I do time, because I'm probably harming somebody, and not just myself, but other people that I'm dealing it to. So, and I'm not getting into a debate about drugs, because this isn't what it's about. But it's about the evolution of how we evolve and grow as human beings and come to these realizations. And so this is how we communicate when we get in the same room, start talking, because maybe you have a prejudgment about what a system is, or a service is, or the person at the other end of that line is actually up to. Oh, that person's just trying to do the 1, 2, 3. They're not really care about whether I live or die. And so maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not true at all. Maybe we got a lot of prejudgments for all of us. And so I really love this call, because we're hearing the reality, and that is the reality. This is a demonstration project of low barrier, low demand. And that was the idea. That wasn't going to be a system. It was going to be the autonomy, and let the youth would drive the program. And so finally we're in a meeting where the youth are starting to drive the program. And so that's really good. But at the same time, I need to, as this person that's doing the work too, I need more information on what's working and what's not working, so we don't have these dangerous situations where someone does get into an apartment and they do end up getting overrun by unhealthy youth that are being short-sighted with their choices. And how do I set those boundaries? And how can I help you set those boundaries? Because these are just one of the many things that other people, through experience and growth and being an adult, kind of learns how to do that. And maybe we could not mentor, I don't like that word because that's a serious word, but we can help you write that individualized housing stability plan. And so you can run your life, and we can help you with your plan. And that's really the spirit of this program. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation, though, because it really is obviously getting a good amount of, at least got me going. So thank you.
Yeah, and David, yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And I feel like it's such a big question, and I thought it was really good to kind of focus it on like this program specifically. But I also think in terms of growth and being able to, like, one of the things that I really, when I think about success and the things that we can control and the things that are out of our control, one of the differentiating features, one of those things that I kind of see, like, as a person, as a human being, one of the best things that ever happened to me was my ability to make mistakes. And not only, some of them are still there, you know, you're always going to have the residuals of decisions that you make, but also having those moments of support and guidance that showed me how to work out of those mistakes. I think it's really difficult when as a young adult you have those additional burdens of having to care for yourself and not have that moment, that safe moment to work through the problems. It's, to me, my experience and the experience of others is you don't really have that space and support when you're faced with, you know, perhaps even making a mistake, to strategize and begin to develop that mindset that mistakes are part of the process. They're not part of your identity. And I think that that's sort of that balance of that conversation of, you know, you really, I speak from experience. I never really understand that I shouldn't have done something until I did it. And I was like, oh, that's why I shouldn't have done it. But that crucial moment, that point of having someone there to support you, and I think this might have been what Tracy was speaking of, and not only work through that, but just ensure that that's not your full identity. That's a part of who you are in the moment that you're working through and you're learning. I just think that that's something that I think is a really important part of growing as a human being as well. Just an idea.
And Maya, I just wanted to point out there's a lot of activity in the chat there.
Thank you for calling that to my attention. Let's see. Yes, I love this conversation about the Wi-Fi because that is a huge barrier. And I know in all of my meetings, I hear everybody say, yeah, I haven't had contact with that client, or, you know, we lose contact, and that's going to happen. But this Wi-Fi thing is a huge barrier. And I'd love to give Z, since I kind of see that you took the reins on that conversation, I'd love to give you a platform to kind of really elevate that topic.
Sure. So a big thing with particularly homeless youth is a lot of them will use text now, which is a free phone service app, which is great because you do have a phone number, you can receive texts, you can receive calls, but there's a few issues to it along the lines of like acquiring internet. On the plaza in Santa Fe, to sign into their free internet, you have to give up your email and what your zip code is. And if you just landed here, say you're traveling, you're one of the traveling youth who goes from state to state, you're not going to know what the zip code is, and you're not going to have access to Wi-Fi. If you don't have an email, or you can't get into your email to verify that it's you, no access to Wi-Fi. Starbucks, they ask you for your name, your email, and I think there's a few other personal questions. I don't remember what they are because I personally refuse to use Starbucks Wi-Fi because they ask for too much information. Nikolai brought up that there's a big issue with if there is a place that has free Wi-Fi that you can just sign into, and it's like a guest Wi-Fi. A lot of the time, security guards or business owners or people who work at the business will actually have the youth leave because they're homeless and they're not welcome to be in the area because it's a bad image, or it's not okay for whatever reason. It's not okay for them to be there or to use the internet, even though it is free internet. Even if you did purchase something like, say, a coffee or whatever to use their internet, they're still going to ask you to leave because you are homeless. Let's see. I think that covers everything I said in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah. And I want to bring up to another barrier with this whole returning phone call thing. You know, I'm 22 and I am in this position, you know, I'm a business person, I guess, or I'm, you know, I do phone calls, but when my personal phone rings, I get anxiety. Phone calls terrify me. And I know that's somewhat unreasonable, but I think that's a pretty common trend with my generation. Phone calls, like contacting me by smoke signal is more efficient than calling me because I'm not going to answer that phone call. I'll have too much anxiety. So I think maybe texting, is always a good option for getting a hold of youth. And then that also plays into that whole, Wi-Fi thing. They can get that text when they get to Wi-Fi. And so I think that's something also to kind of evaluate, that like phone calls are intimidating. And I know the other like older generations are like, phone calls are the best, man. Like, I don't want to text. It's going to take too long. What do you mean we're going to text this? No, youth don't want phone calls. They want text messages.
And I will vouch for that, being is that I know that most people use a service like text now as their phone. If you receive a phone call while you are not at Wi-Fi, it will not tell you until after, like 30 minutes after you've gotten to Wi-Fi, that you've had a phone call. And it is not productive in any way to not even realize that someone's called you, or to be able to listen to the voicemail, or to know who it's from. In only if the number is already saved in that phone specifically, or with text now, you can also use it on like a public computer. You can sign in on a browser, but if you're on a browser, it's not going to have any of those contacts, and it's just going to be random numbers, and you're not going to know quite who it is. Also, on the text versus calls, if you don't have a phone or phone device, and you're just using, say, going to like the public library to use text now to contact people, there's no mic. There is no there's a speaker, but there's no microphone. There's no way to speak on a phone. It's all by text through the browser.
I'd also like to point out Lakita's comment in the chat that maybe you can expand on this, Lakita, the strict requirements or required documents as an obstacle. Can you expand on that, Lakita?
She may have to put in the chat because I know she's at work.
So she did put in the chat that some people tend to lose documents, and some programs have requirements of having to reside in a certain area for a long amount of time. And then Kennedy also mentioned that she's always preferred to text her clients because she also hates phone calls that give them anxiety. Yes, two young people she knows prefer text. The issue comes in texts are easier to miss and ignore, and that she's made it a practice to eventually drop by her clients' apartments when she cannot reach them due to lack of phone or Wi-Fi, and that texting is an easy way to meet the young person where they are at. It's actually a few other things in the chat as well. Nikolai also dropped to build better habits, and to build better habits, you need consistency. And if you don't have that option of good water, having consistent Wi-Fi, messaging, shelter access to documents or storage of valuables and essentials, and that our entire generation is traumatized for one reason or another, it often seems. So building a healthy space is essential, and that natural consequences are a reality of the world, but that we should aim to surround people with a better existing reality to help more people. Going back to what Lakita said about losing documents and having to have certain documents in place, a lot of shelters will ask you for, say, your ID. Well, if you're under 16, the likelihood of you having an ID is very slim. Keeping a hold of things like your birth certificate or your social security card. Well, if your birth certificate is this big piece of paper, and if you don't have a specific place that's waterproof, other types of weather resistant, the likelihood is that you're not going to be able to keep track of it because it's not something you should carry on you. It's something you're supposed to keep in a safe place. But where do you keep it if you don't have a safe place? What do you do if you do keep it in your backpack and your backpack gets stolen? So it is a big issue not having for programs requiring specific documents and not being able to keep them in a safe place or even knowing where they are or having them in the first place.
Yeah, just kind of going off of that. I lost my social security card in the process of going through a lot of these programs, you know, going between youth works and street outreach, the STAR program, or, you know, numerous job agencies and numerous job applications. All of them required your social security card, and preferably the actual card. Um, and so, you know, driving around, not having a place to stay, not having a place to keep it, you know, I'd keep my social security card underneath my camp stove for a little while. You know, I didn't have anywhere to put anything like that. Um, and so, of course, eventually it got lost. All of these different places had copies of it, but copies aren't any good if you don't have the original. So just, you know, making sure that stuff like that stays safe and is there when you need it. And then, uh, you know, is there a reason that all of these agencies need to have the original copy of that documentation? Like, is there fraud at risk there? Because that's just one more thing that's preventing young people from reaching out for that help.
Sorry, I was eating really quick. I'm sorry. But yeah, this is something we've been talking about in the YAB a lot, actually, is this need for documentation and how do you keep your documents safe? And it's something that kind of doesn't really have an answer, unfortunately, because you do need that original, unfortunately, for jobs, for housing, for whatever you may need it for. You do need that, unfortunately, and there's not much we can do about it. So I think another thing that is kind of a need in these services, and I know I've heard that maybe certain agencies can't do this, but like offering you a place to store those things. Like, I don't know if like outreach could do it or something, like, hey, you can leave your things here and we'll keep it in a file box or something. But I think that's a big need.
Yeah, and that is an ongoing issue for agencies. It is a requirement of just about every grant. They do want to make sure there's no identity theft going on and that it is the person who says they are. So originals are required. And even sometimes the originals, a person's got a person's identity and it's not them. But we have to do our due diligence to meet the HUD requirements or the state requirements, and this is something we all have to do in life, right? And so this is also a life skill. But I do appreciate that feedback about, hey, maybe if there was a safe place for documentation for people that are experiencing homelessness, where I could keep my most vital important stuff, like a safe deposit box, a center that is supervised at shelter or wherever I go regularly, that would be a good idea. So I appreciate that one.
Yeah, and the fact that you mentioned the word like safety deposit box, like maybe if there's some kind of issue with agencies holding on to that paperwork, maybe some kind of funding to get a youth security box thing, that might be an idea.
The village I worked, we would issue a locker and they would have their own lock and we'd have an emergency key one key for one person, but they would have their own combination and no one else
And
could get into it.
Janae, I saw you unmute. Was there something you wanted to say?
No, I'm sorry, I accidentally hit the button.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure I was giving you the opportunity to if you did want to.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's an awesome thing that you just mentioned, David, the whole idea of like having a locker that's your own, that's a safe place to keep your documents or whatever it is that you need. I think that's something that should be implemented in more agencies. And we are coming up on our last little bit of time here, so I want to give anybody an opportunity anybody who had something that they wanted to say or had any questions come up, I want to give them the opportunity to mention that now if such a need exists.
So I had 3 things. I'll go off on lockers first. So lockers would be great, particularly for people who are still going to school. It's very hard to keep your textbooks, your notebooks, and all of your school stuff, which takes up a whole backpack by itself, with you when you're living out of your backpack. So having a place that you go to regularly where you have a locker that only you can get into. Say it's after school, you go to street outreach, for example, and you just hop in your locker, you pull out your school textbooks, you do homework for a few hours, get something to eat, put your things back in your locker, take a shower, and you're better prepared for the night. That would be a huge difference in a lot of not only students being able to do well in school, but staying in school and keeping documents safe. I wanted to bring up 2 other barriers that happen with homeless youth, particularly homeless. One is particularly for homeless women. Bathrooms. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a place to pee after 10 p.m.? Any idea? Because like it is impossible to find a place to use the restroom. The only places that are still open are the bars. And if you are not 21 yet, you're not getting in there. They
Or if
will
you
not
don't have
let
an
you.
ID.
Yeah, or if you don't have an ID, where are you gonna go use the restroom? Are you gonna risk going pee in the alley because it's right there and getting arrested for public indecency? Because there's no restaurants, the hotels won't let you in. You might be able to sneak past the hotel attendant and run in real quick, but after a certain point that gets cops called or security, you get forcefully removed. Like, where's a good place to go to the bathroom after 10 p.m.? Because until you're 21 or have an ID, you basically have to set an alarm or know, oh crap, it's 9:30. I have to go to this restaurant before it closes so that I can use the restroom before it's too late. That is a barrier I wanted to bring up, particularly for females, because dudes can kind of just walk off in the corner real quick and it's less noticeable, it's less of a big deal. For girls, you got to like moon everyone and squat and do the whole thing. And if there's not a safe place for that, guess what? It's not fun. The other thing I wanted to bring up that was specifically a barrier for me in utilizing services was food allergies. It's not easy to acquire food while you're homeless and you are I'm allergic to dairy. And so everyone say you're packing sandwiches and they're all ham and cheese. Okay, well, I can't eat that because now the only thing left in there is an apple and, oh, look, a carton of milk. Okay, out of that whole lunch bag, the only thing I can eat in there is the apple because that's the only thing that doesn't have dairy. So Street Outreach actually did a wonderful thing. They would have chili every week, and I would never eat it because there was no ingredient list. It was made by someone and donated to Outreach. So Outreach didn't know what was in it. And they actually took the time to contact the person who made the chili to find out what they put in it so that I would know if it was safe for me to eat or not. Just personal barrier that I wanted to throw out there, even though it's a smaller percentage of the population.
Yeah, and that also carries over into like the outreach snacks that get handed out. Like when I go and do my outreach, I was looking at it and I was like, well, let's see, I have these granola bars, but a lot of them have chocolate in them or nuts, 2 big allergens, or the little cracker things. their peanut butter or their cheese. Now that's, eliminated for that. So I think that's awesome that you're bringing that to everybody's attention, Z, because it is something that's like you don't think about until you meet somebody who has these allergies. I have an allergy to lemons, which is like if there's not lemons in very many things, I can avoid it pretty easily. People who have allergies to nuts and cheese, things of that nature, not as easy to avoid, unfortunately. And thank you for bringing all those things up, Z. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. I'll just admit that for a good portion of the time I lived off of Slim Jims, the little Slim Jims in the Outreach pack, because that was the only thing in there that didn't have dairy. And I hate Slim Jims to this day. I will not eat them anymore. I won't do it. Mm-mm.
I just wanted to throw one more resource out there that I would have liked to brought up earlier, but there's currently something in place right now where you can go back to school and you can go to college for free, and it's because of COVID. I'm not sure what the program's called, but you can go back to college for free, and it doesn't.
Mexico Opportunity Scholarship.
Yes, and it doesn't interfere with FAFSA. So that combined with FAFSA, you can go to school for free and get a place to live partially paid for, which is good because you're not only putting people in, educational and self-bettering situations, but you're also serving our main purpose, which is to get people off of the streets and into healthy housing. And I think school's a great method for that.
Yes.
I'm gonna add on that because I actually have the New Mexico Opportunity Scholarship, and that's what's paying for this upcoming fall 2022 semester for me. That's my tuition right there.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. When I first heard about this scholarship, I was so pumped. Like Nikolai said, it's an opportunity for housing, but also an opportunity for education, which is huge, so huge. And I love that. I do want to take our last 5 minutes or 4 minutes now to kind of update you guys on what we've been doing in the YAB, but I'm not going to do it myself. See, we have Lakita and Sarantino and Tyrell, Z. You guys have been attending meetings regularly. Would you guys mind telling everybody what we've been talking about?
Hi, everyone. Tyrell Morgan here. We're Youth Service Coordinator, Youth Shelters and Family Services. But mostly what we've been talking about in meetings or, just trying to get out of the comfort zone. I know one of the new things that we've been doing is having breakout rooms to kind of get to know each other more. And one thing I hope we really get from that is for everyone to kind of speak up a little bit more. I mean, I know it causes anxiety to talk in front of a lot of people and kind of you don't know if your words really going to be heard, but I really like those breakout rooms to kind of have one another speak up a little bit more and just kind of know each other and know who you're talking to in the breakout rooms. So I really like those breakout rooms that we've been doing. Other than that, we've been talking about different life skills. We've had different guest speakers come in to kind of share their stories. I know one of the last meetings we kind of seen Z's video and Maya's video, which was very inspiring and how far they've come. And you guys are really big inspirations to a lot of people out there, especially me. But I think I would like Sarantino and Lakita to speak up a little bit more about what we do in the YAB meetings. If one of you two could go.
I can go. Yeah, I usually don't really say much in the video or in the meetings, because I usually like to listen to other people's insight and their own opinions about the matter. And I find it interesting how many of us have our own opinions and different problems that we go through that give us the knowledge to better understand other people's situations. And as like Tyrell said about the breakout rooms, it's interesting because you get to have a one-on-one or have a few people in one group talking about a situation that they've dealt with or giving their own experiences and clarifying what they have been through and just most of the challenges they have faced. And I believe it's inspiring how they've come so far as well, like Z, because it's very interesting how far she's come and the things she had to go through, and the rest of us that have gone through these types of situations but are still moving forward today. But yeah.
Yeah, we've really come a long way in YAB. I'm really satisfied with where we're at. We're really, getting connected with one another. There's so much more participation, and I think that's kind of evident even in this meeting. YAB is speaking up so much more, and I'm so excited about that, and I love it. One thing we've also been doing is we're getting kind of more into the nitty-gritty aspects of homelessness. We're talking about the difficulties of flying a sign. We're talking about couch surfing 101. We're sharing our own personal experience, and we're just really kind of getting down to it, getting into those details. And I'm thrilled. And I want to thank all of you for attending this meeting. I think it was awesome. I loved the dialogue that happened. And I hope we can have more meetings like this where we get that youth voice, that youth-driven aspect.
Yes, absolutely. I know the agenda that you all put together, we didn't get to cover everything. So maybe we can extend this meeting to our next core team meeting. And if anything else comes up that we do need to discuss, like program wise, we can just add it to your agenda. And I really, really enjoyed this meeting. And I think it's been said by multiple participants that this has been really fruitful and the kind of meetings that we should be having. So I want to thank all of you YAB members for participating, for sharing, and just for showing up in not only here, but every week at our YAB meetings. I really do appreciate everything that you do. And like it was said, like you guys are inspiring to myself, and hopefully you can continue to inspire. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And I'm so looking forward to next meeting. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have an awesome day, everybody. And thank you again.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great day, everyone.
Bye, thank you.